Good evening. This is Nathan Cross with American Daily News, and this morning, inside a federal courtroom, a moment unfolded that pushed the American legal system to its edge. The former president of the United States stood just one sentence away from incarceration. Not figuratively, not hypothetically. Literally one sentence. What transpired has since been described by legal experts as one of the most direct confrontations with judicial authority in modern American history. And it's critical you understand this. Every second of it was documented, recorded, and preserved in real time. A federal judge looked Donald Trump directly in the eye and issued a stark command: sit down or go to jail. And Trump did not sit down. What followed was a 12-minute standoff that forced courtroom security to step forward, attorneys to physically intervene, and the entire legal system to pause in collective tension. I've spent the last several hours reviewing court transcripts, legal commentary, and first-hand accounts from inside that room, and I'm going to walk you through exactly what happened. Because in this case, the details matter far more than the headlines. Before we step inside that courtroom, you need to understand the atmosphere that led up to this moment. For weeks, seasoned legal observers had been noticing warning signs, not in official filings, not in formal motions, but in patterns, subtle shifts that experienced court watchers know how to recognize. Trump has always been combative in court. That part isn't new, but his defiance has historically followed a familiar rhythm, almost a rehearsed routine. Arrive late to attract media attention, mutter comments just loud enough to be overheard, post inflammatory statements during lunch breaks, exit with defiant sound bites for the cameras waiting outside. That's the pattern. That's what everyone expected. But yesterday, that pattern collapsed. Analysts who closely monitor Trump's courtroom behavior flagged multiple red alerts, angry Truth Social posts late into the night, a last-minute reshuffling of his legal team, extra security arriving earlier than scheduled, and perhaps, most telling of all, complete silence from his attorneys. There's something you learn when covering cases like this. Whenever Donald Trump goes quiet before a court appearance, something is about to detonate. Early this morning, courthouse security reported what they described as unusual tension in the defense staging area. Emergency strategy meetings that hadn't been held in weeks. The kind of frantic last-minute huddles Trump's team only calls when they're bracing for something volatile. A damaging witness, a surprise ruling, or a client about to abandon the script entirely. No one knew which scenario was unfolding. Some suspected all three were colliding at once, but observers were certain of one thing: Trump's posture had changed. And when a criminal defendant shifts demeanor without warning, even subtly, experienced judges take notice. Judge Engoron noticed. This is exactly the kind of moment you need to understand if you want to know how the legal system actually works when it's tested. If that matters to you, make sure you're subscribed to this channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what happens next in this case. Because what I'm about to show you reveals how close we came to seeing a former president in handcuffs. Now, let me take you inside the courtroom. Trump is seated at the defense table in his trademark Navy suit. The prosecution is questioning a key financial witness. Standard procedure, routine testimony, and then it happened. Trump didn't lean over to whisper to his attorney. He didn't slide a note across the table. He spoke out loud, sharp, deliberate, and directed straight at the witness stand. "That's a complete lie," Trump said. "A total fabrication. Everyone in this room knows it." The courtroom froze. Picture the scene. Every attorney stopped taking notes. Every spectator froze in place. Every camera operator in the overflow room leaned closer to their monitors. Judge Engoron slowly removed his reading glasses. He lifted his gaze, and the warning he delivered in that moment was anything but routine. It wasn't procedural, it wasn't polite, and it certainly wasn't negotiable. Legal analysts who later examined the transcript described the judge's response as immediate, unmistakable, and most critically, fully backed by federal contempt authority. "Mr. Trump," Judge Engoron said, his voice slicing through the silence, "you will not speak unless you are addressed. You will not interrupt these proceedings. Do you understand?" And this is where the situation veered into territory no one anticipated. Trump did not retreat. Within seconds of the warning, he leaned back in his chair and said, clearly enough for the court reporter to record, "This whole thing is a joke, a complete joke. Let's be absolutely clear about what just occurred." A defendant in a federal trial openly ridiculed a sitting judge on the record immediately after receiving a direct judicial warning. These were not the words of someone asking for mercy. They were the words of someone deliberately testing the limits of authority in that room. Judge Engoron had those limits, and he enforced them. According to court transcripts, the judge issued not one, not two, but three escalating warnings in the span of just 4 minutes. The first followed Trump's initial verbal interruption. Then the second came after Trump audibly scoffed and muttered, "Kangaroo court," while the prosecution was speaking. The third came after Trump arose from his seat. "Mr. Trump, sit down immediately," the judge ordered. "Sit down now, or I will have you removed from this courtroom and placed in a detention cell for the remainder of today's proceedings." That word detention hit the room like a shockwave. Consider the gravity of that moment. A federal judge presiding over an active trial had just informed a former president of the United States that noncompliance would result in immediate confinement. This was no longer a caution. It was a direct enforceable command with real consequences. Trump's lead attorney, Alina Habba, sprang to her feet and requested an emergency sidebar. The judge granted it. For 12 minutes, 12 excruciating minutes, attorneys clustered at the bench, locked in hushed, urgent exchanges. And throughout that entire span, Trump remained standing at the defense table, arms folded tight, jaw set, refusing to take a seat. When the sidebar finally ended, Habba returned to the defense table and leaned in close to Trump. Observers in the gallery later said her voice was fast, intense, and unmistakably urgent. Trump shook his head. She spoke again, this time with greater force. He turned away. Then, and this detail matters, she placed a firm hand on his shoulder and said something that caused him slowly and reluctantly to lower himself back into his chair. Pause on that moment. Trump's own attorneys were forced to physically intervene to stop their client from being escorted to a holding cell in the middle of his own fraud trial. Think about what that means. His own legal team, the people whose job is to defend him, had to physically convince him to avoid being jailed. That's not normal courtroom drama. That's a client completely out of control and lawyers desperately trying to prevent a disaster. Now, we need to talk about why Judge Engoron's response carries such weight, because this wasn't merely about maintaining order in a courtroom. It was about preserving the integrity of the judicial process itself. Trump's conduct went beyond simple defiance. It threatened to destabilize the proceedings altogether, and Judge Engoron recognized that instantly. His response wasn't emotional. It wasn't retaliatory. It was judicial. He didn't issue hollow warnings. He didn't delay action. He cited specific contempt authorities. He referenced established incarceration precedents. And that level of precision is critical. Former federal prosecutors, speaking anonymously to media outlets, described Trump's behavior as a deliberate provocation, an attempt to engineer grounds for a mistrial or future appeal. But what Judge Engoron demonstrated in that moment was restraint paired with readiness. His actions weren't just legally defensible, they were strategic. They were delivered with such exacting precision that there was no room for misunderstanding, and critically, no room for appeal. That level of care reveals something important. This judge anticipated this very scenario. This channel exists to break down moments like this so you understand the legal mechanics, not just the headlines. If you found this analysis valuable, hit that like button so more people see this kind of coverage. Because what I'm about to show you next reveals Trump's actual strategy, and it's more calculated than you might think. Judge Engoron is not presiding passively over these proceedings. He is actively managing a defendant who believes the rules do not apply to him. And here's what most headline coverage will miss. It is extraordinarily difficult to command the focused attention of a federal judge. Today, Trump succeeded and almost immediately paid the price. For decades, Trump has operated under a single assumption, that he can intimidate, exhaust, or overpower any opposition, that institutions eventually yield, that pressure produces compliance. But federal courtrooms do not function that way. Federal judges do not bend. They hold lifetime appointments. They are insulated from political influence, and they wield something Trump has rarely encountered, direct enforceable authority. Judge Engoron's warning is now permanently embedded in the official court record. It was not intended to humiliate. It was intended to communicate one unmistakable message. Obstruction, intimidation, and theatrical disruption will not be tolerated in this courtroom. The judge stated plainly that Trump's conduct was inconsistent with the basic decorum required of all parties appearing before the court. Translated into plain language, you are not exempt. You will follow the same rules as everyone else, or you will face the same consequences. That is not a tone federal judges adopt lightly. When it appears, it signals that something genuinely serious is at stake, and this is where most coverage falls short. This was not an isolated lapse. This was not a momentary loss of composure. To understand what happened, you have to look at the full sequence within a single 6-hour window. During the morning session, Trump interrupted sworn testimony and disregarded direct judicial instructions. During the lunch recess, he posted multiple attacks on the judge via Truth Social. His legal team filed motions formally challenging the judge's impartiality. Outside the courthouse, Trump told reporters the trial was a disgrace to American values. All of it. Same day, same 6 hours. When Trump moves across multiple fronts at once, it signals coordination, not coincidence. And legal analysts are now openly examining several troubling possibilities. 1, Trump may be laying the groundwork to refuse future court appearances altogether. 2, he may be deliberately provoking a mistrial through sustained disruption. 3, and this is the scenario causing the greatest concern, he may be attempting to trigger a constitutional crisis by openly defying a direct court order. Now, here is the broader context that helps explain his behavior. Trump is under unprecedented pressure from every direction. His attorneys want restraint to avoid additional contempt exposure. His political advisors want visible defiance. His campaign donors want a narrative of persecution. His core supporters want him to fight loudly and publicly. Those forces are pulling him in opposite directions simultaneously. And what we witnessed today was the collision point. Trump is attempting to navigate these competing pressures while simultaneously facing multiple criminal indictments across multiple jurisdictions. And when defendants in that position make abrupt, dramatic moves, they are not acting from confidence. They are acting under strain. They are acting from desperation. They are acting from exposure. Today, Judge Engoron decisively removed one option from Trump's playbook. He did not issue vague cautions. He did not postpone a difficult decision. He did not solicit debate before acting. He issued a direct, unmistakable command. Follow the rules of this courtroom or face immediate detention. Now, let me step back and explain why this moment matters far beyond the immediate legal drama. What we are witnessing is a stress test of judicial accountability, a real-time examination of whether the American rule of law still holds under pressure. Trump is testing whether the legal system can be bent to individual will. Judge Engoron is demonstrating that it cannot. Prosecutors are working to ensure the proceedings do not descend into disorder, and the American public, across political lines, is watching to see whether justice is applied evenly without carve-outs or exceptions. Remember, Trump believed he could delay this trial indefinitely. He believed witnesses could be pressured. He believed media attention could be leveraged to influence judicial outcomes. He believed he was insulated from consequence. But tonight, the opposite reality is taking shape. The trial is moving forward on schedule. Witnesses are testifying under oath without hesitation. And the presiding judge is enforcing accountability in real time, on camera, and on the official record. Outside the courthouse, the lead prosecutor briefly addressed the media. She stated that the case will proceed exactly as planned. She emphasized that no individual stands above the law. And she made clear that the court has already signaled that further disruptions will carry serious consequences. These were not sound bites crafted for attention. They were formal statements from a prosecution team fully aware of how consequential this moment has become. So what happens next? As the trial continues in the days and weeks ahead, more clarity will emerge about what Trump intended to accomplish with today's confrontation. But one conclusion is already unavoidable. Judge Engoron's response was appropriate. It preserved courtroom order. It protected the integrity of the proceedings. And it reaffirmed the constitutional authority of the federal judiciary. And that, more than any single outburst, may prove to be the most consequential development of the day. What happens next depends entirely on Trump's behavior. If he complies with court directives, this moment may be remembered as a turning point toward accountability. If he defies the court again, Judge Engoron has already made one thing unmistakably clear. He is prepared to act. He is prepared to impose real consequences. And those consequences include incarceration. Tonight, multiple reports indicate Trump's legal team is scrambling. Mar-a-Lago is unusually quiet. And when Trump goes silent after a confrontation of this magnitude, it usually means only one thing. He's reassessing, recalculating, and weighing his next move. Because today, Trump was forced to confront a reality he has resisted his entire life. Federal judges possess real power. Courts wield binding authority. And no one, not even a former president of the United States, stands above the law. Let me leave you with 3 key takeaways from today's events. First, a sitting federal judge issued a direct, legally enforceable warning that included incarceration as a consequence. This was not symbolic. It was not procedural. It was a judge telling Donald Trump in unmistakable terms that failure to follow courtroom rules would result in confinement. Second, Trump's own legal team had to physically intervene to prevent their client from being removed from the courtroom. That alone tells you how close this came to an unprecedented moment in American legal history. Third, this was not accidental. Trump's conduct appears calculated, testing judicial limits, probing for appellate leverage, or laying groundwork for something larger. But today, the court pushed back harder than he anticipated. The courtroom held. The judge did not flinch. And for the first time in this entire legal saga, Donald Trump appears genuinely uncertain about what comes next. This story is far from over. The next court appearance could be the one where Trump actually crosses the line and faces detention. The judge has drawn a bright red line, and Trump now knows exactly where it is. The question is whether he'll respect it or whether his need for confrontation will override his self-preservation instinct. And that question will be answered in the coming days as this trial continues. If you want to stay ahead of how this unfolds, make sure you're subscribed and that notification bell is on so you get alerts the moment we post. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Trump will comply going forward? Or are we headed toward an even larger confrontation? Do you think the judge should have jailed him today? Let me know what you think. And if this breakdown helped you understand what actually happened today, not just the headlines, but the legal mechanics and why they matter, hit that like button. I'm Nathan Cross. This is American Daily News, and that's the situation.